All right, hello everybody. Thanks for coming in to listen to our riveting conversation about CBRS, private LTE, and the test lab we were able to work with the folks from CU Denver on. We're actually pretty excited about it, and we'll talk a little bit about that today and then open the floor up to questions for you guys about CBRS, private LTE. So if we want to go down the line and just introduce our team members, that'd be great.
My name is Dan Griner. I'm the director of the Smart Futures Lab, which is an incubator and accelerator for smart cities technology using 5G connectivity. And happy to be here talking with all of you today.
My name is Marie Evans, and I'm the program manager for the Smart Futures Lab. So I do both the back end and the front end support for the lab itself and interfacing and helping with the companies that are part of our incubator and accelerator.
Good afternoon, Doug Kwiatkowski with RF Connect. I'm the Chief Enterprise Architect for RF Connect. Been in the wireless business for almost 40 years.
And my name is Patrick. I'm on the business development side of it, so I still tell stories and wrangle these guys to come and talk about how great these things are once we figure out how to deploy them and build them. So can I ask real quick, in the room, I mean, do we have consultants? Do we have universities? Do we have end users? Or, who's got a familiarity with CBRS, private LTE, or these type of deployments? Has anybody dealt with it at all? Right, we got a resounding no, all right.
And so you guys can move closer if you want. Our t-shirt gun is broken today. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're depending on Marie's softball underhand throw.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, don't be shy. Please ask all the questions in the world, right? We're scheduled for an hour, right? So, I mean, I don't know how interesting we're going to be for an hour. So the more interaction we get with you guys asking questions of how we did it or what we did, right, and how it can benefit you is going to be really part of it, right, and part of the puzzle. So what we did is we basically worked with Dan and the partners to develop a living lab for the school and for the community, right, and for the smart city being Denver, and tied it all together, and we're doing indoor and outdoor coverage in that space, right? And the objective is to basically have a solution that is going to give room for growth and for development in the business space. So for us, right, as RF Connect, what we did is we worked on the design and the deployment of the 5G network. So we did everything from the core and the SAS to the deployment of said network. And we worked with Dan and his team on the selection of the different types of technologies and what they wanted to do. So we actually stood up a 5G network with 5G radios at that site, which is one of the first networks built in that fashion in North America, 5G radios with a 5G network. So for us, it was a resounding success, and we were able to use our design and engineering skills to do that. But for you and the group, Dan, I mean, what exactly were you guys looking for, or how did it benefit to start?
Well, obviously, to set up something like this, many universities, if any of you are attached to universities are not overflowing with cash to invest in these types of things usually. So we actually made use of EDA funding in order to set this up. So we used a grant to help set up the 5G the network. Obviously, this is connected to that, like we said, an incubator and accelerator for smart city tech. And one key partnership was also connecting to the city. So we used another group called the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance, which helps to connect municipalities directly to companies that are actually developing smart city technology. So this really was kind of a consortium of groups coming together to bring this. So they actually helped introduce us to RF Connect and made us aware of the opportunity and what kinds of things could be possible with that 5G network. So they really demonstrated the use cases that could be made possible by having that. I would say that we learned from industry as a university on what could be done by implementing something like that.
100%. And actually, we mentioned an interesting thing there in respect to the funding. So we did work through the grant aid process to get that funded, but as part of that process, we actually got the services and the technologies in the Omnia system, right? So we've actually got an Omnia code for it now, which in some instances benefits some folks, right? So we can
Which greatly sped up the process of procurement, by
yeah,
the way.
100%, because we weren't starting from zero, right? So that took its own period of time to get that in, but once we got that done, it made it 100 times easier, and it's replicatable, right? So you guys can actually log in Omnia, you can see the services, and you can avail of them, right? And we can get the discounted pricing and pass that on to you guys. So there's unequivocally a benefit in that regard. So for you, Marie, and the community and the deployment of it, I mean, what benefit did you see from it, or how did it work with you and what you're doing so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you talking about kind of impact and
Impacting, yeah.
For sure. So as the program manager, I come from the lens of who are the people that our program is impacting, who are the people that the 5G testbed is impacting. And most immediately, that is obviously our cohort companies, our founders. And all of our founders belong to the new majority. And the new majority are people who are people of color, people with disabilities, or women. And typically, people from these populations are drastically disenfranchised compared to their white counterparts. So our 5G testbed and our program is meant to help bridge some of that gap. In addition, we are a university, so we have, and our university has a high population of non-traditional students. We are a, what's it called?
We are a Hispanic serving institution, as well as an Anapisi
Yes.
serving institution,
Yes.
which is Asian and Pacific Islander.
Yes,
There you go.
yes.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of these students, being non-traditional, they also have roots within their communities. And so we are hoping some of this is yet to be realized. We are working to build out some of this capacity that this program and the 5G testbed brings innovation and access within the community as well. We're a research institution, so we have faculty that are building research projects that will attach to the 5G testbed. And then, as you said, we have some projects with government as well. They can contract with the companies that come into our program and develop pilots and use our 5G testbed to build out and validate those pilots and the concepts.
That's great, thank you. So overall, if you look at what the basic goal was, right, in respect to the vision, the solution that we've put in solves some of those problems and gets us to a good starting point, right? And Doug, I'm going to throw some questions at you in respect to, you know, the what's unique about 5G and private wireless networks with these type of deployments, right? What technical advantages does it give us over and above a traditional Wi-Fi type application, which you can't support these apps and techs on? So, I mean, from an engineering point of view, there's some benefits there that we can avail of, correct?
Yeah, so the primary difference between 4G and 5G is efficiency, right? So the encoding rate for 4G is a lot lower than in 5G, right? Which is the same if you were using Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 5, it's the encoding rate. So efficiency for the protocol is significantly increased. So 5G from 4G is 512 QAM versus 1024 QAM. So if you guys ever dig down into how this is encoded, the efficiency rate goes up significantly. So 4G and 5G really are the same thing. They're going to do delivery, but 5G is going to give you more efficiency, and it's also going to give you more capacity. So more connected devices, right? So you can, kind of like a Wi-Fi access point can only address so many MAC addresses, right? And then it has to start shedding them. Well, in 5G, you can literally connect thousands of devices and have them all attached into that access point.
Let me, if I could help explain for people who are not RF engineers, because I'm not one, and I have to, in my mind, I am constantly translating this. So in the smart city space, how this really becomes super useful, if you think of vehicle-to-vehicle transmission of information, where you're doing super low latency, almost real time, not just monitoring of information, but responding to it. Or vehicle to infrastructure. So you have a car talking to a light, right? Or a car talking to some other type of traffic information system, right? These have to be super low latency, almost instantaneous. It might seem that way now with 5G or with LTE. However, it's not. And the computing power that it takes to do some of those things is also very, very heavy with some of these slower speeds. So think of what can be done with faster speeds. You can offload information much quicker as well, which means you're not depending on heavier computing power under battery loads. So smaller batteries, lower computing power, longer battery life, smaller computing power on the unit. Now you can offload to a cloud because you have a faster speed that's enabling you to move that information off. So it changes the structure of like sensors and devices or like autonomous vehicles and things like that and what they're able to do and for how long that they're able to do it. And with what complexity that they're able to do it. So we have companies that are coming in and wanting to develop tech. That tech can be much more useful for longer with this type of technology and communication system.
Perfect, perfect. So when we designed this and deployed it, right? I mean, I would love to tell you guys everything's a bed of roses on day one, right? And it's not, right? This is somewhat of a science experiment as much as anything else. We talked a little bit about that earlier, right? Nothing is perfect, right, out of the box on day one when you're trying to create something new. So when we were looking at this, I mean, some of our problems were devices and applications and things that we could actually run on it, not necessarily, hey, here's the golden ticket, right, and we've got everything on day one out of the box. So some of the things that we ran into were devices and applications for the system as well, right?
Correct. There's constantly a challenge with, finding the right hardware that's going to meet up with this. We're, because this is new tech, it's not like everything's off the shelf and you can go find it. There is lead time challenges and stuff like this, but with any kind of new tech, we're constantly hoping to push that envelope, and our companies are also pushing that envelope, right? They're coming to us with new use cases, and we hope that they do. We hope that they surprise us and are continuing to push that tech envelope. And as a university, that's where we need to be. We need to be at that forefront, not lagging behind with technology that's already been, adapted and already in the public market.
Right. So any questions so far on anything things we've talked about, anything of interest, anything perk your guys' ears up at all? Right. Yes, sir.
Hi.
Speak up.
Actually, I'm one of the tech guys as well. So what I would like to hear a little bit is that you were saying about 4G and 5G that the great difference is about pushing performance and getting better efficiency. You know that in Research Academy we are already talking about 6G, and so probably we are pushing even harder, farther the efficiency when we come to smart surfaces, for instance, where we come to the 100-hour antennas. So what are your thoughts about that? Like 5G to 6G will also be like another pushing efficiency, or will be something completely different?
No, that's exactly right. So every step in technology is really just the efficiency and the encoding rate of how much we can crush data down. And to Dan's point, the latency, right, for 5G is extremely low. So some of these systems out there that are held to the gold standards, so like collision avoidance programs, like the V2X, and those require sub 10 millisecond latency, right, to do a collision avoidance with a pedestrian or another vehicle or fixed object. So latency is the key for driving a lot of these new immersive technologies.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Any other questions so far? Yeah. Okay.
Can I have one?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah. So I'm in my institution, there's also a living laboratory focused on smart city. I'm from Poland, from Poznań, city of Poznań. And we have a constant question how to keep the value which is produced in the living lab in the environment of smart city living lab, or we are a little bit more expanded because it's not only smart city, but also art and science community in the city, healthcare, quality of life, also some creative industries. And the value which we identified is the volume of the community which we gather around the smart city. The projects, of course, as the use cases examples,
but how you manage the value which builds your business or visibility in a community of the city as this city living club. Maybe you can answer this.
Do you mean how do we manage the value of the projects that are coming out of the program?
Yeah, the marketing value basically of your small living lab, because it brings a new flow, new value chain of the new projects to show successful incubation or successful projects. So, what is the
Are you asking about
mechanism
measurement?
you
How
manage
we
the
measure
measures?
that?
The metrics.
Metrics.
Yeah, so, our funder, EDA, they ask for specific metrics around our success, around given goals that were part of our, our stipulations for getting the grant. So we actually have to measure how many jobs really were created as a result of the program, how much money was raised by the companies that were part of the program, how many pilots and things like that were created by means of that. I think, so, there's those kind of economic pieces that, relate directly to jobs and to businesses. But I think because of our connection to I mentioned that Colorado Smart Cities Alliance, which is a nonprofit, they actually talk to municipalities on the front end and find out what are challenges within those communities that need to be solved. And they really provide almost a matchmaking service for the companies. So it's not just a matter of how many jobs are created, but we're also solving problems within the community. So there's that element as well. It's not just a matter of making money, but you're also solving these problems that are demonstrated within the community. So those are some other metrics that we're looking at as positive. So I think they have currently 70 projects that are currently underway through that process that they've been working through. We had 10 companies that went through last year, which resulted in 11 companies, and with 5 different pilot programs in multiple cities, and I think a little under $500,000 was raised between all the different companies. We've continued supporting a couple of the companies that are still in their incubation stage, and we are going to continue supporting some of them with testing this year. So, it's an ongoing process and as to what kind of metrics will come out of these things, but that's how we're testing it so far. Those are some of the things we're measuring so far. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was specifically interested whether you manage the size of community and the size, what is your narration to citizens about the social and people-related problem solutions you deliver.
Like
this brings the value for you.
How do we choose what
problems
we take on? Yeah. So, that's another thing. The application process is a whole nother thing. We have a 37-question application process where we look at different metrics around the company size, what's their experience in taking on these kinds of problems, what is the value proposition of that challenge that they're trying to take on. And then we actually have an advisory panel of new majority founders and professionals in the smart city space who are able to kind of give us feedback on the viability of those ideas. So we don't depend on just our own opinions on that, but we also look to experts in that space to give us feedback on whether these ideas have some real value to take forward.
So, there's some intangibles with that, though, like quality of life and how it benefits the community. Doug, on the county-wide projects you're working on in respect to, Wi-Fi, which backhauls on CBRS, private LTE, and 5G networks, that's all focused on quality of life for the communities, connectivity to the homes, all of those types of applications, correct?
Yeah, plus crime prevention, illegal dumping. So cities are wiring up their communities with remote cameras, and CBRS is a great product for delivery, right? So you can avoid all that fiber cost. So, you can wire up an entire city with 4K cameras. And in one particular community, they had an illegal dumping problem. and they needed a mobile asset. Now, illegal dumping moves, right? When they get caught, they just start dumping somewhere else. So they bring in cameras, they'll set it up, and they'll monitor a particular area, they'll catch the offenders, and then if there's another area, they can move these around. So these are mobile assets that you can also deploy in a community, right? So another thing would be, let's say, events. So if you have an event where you have a particular park or community event area that you need to have, particular communication, whether it's point of sale or, public safety, things like that, right? So you can deploy these assets and put them out there, and you can run it all on CBRS very cost effectively.
When you boil it down for schools and universities, like quality of life for students, we are working with one particular school. They want coverage in all outdoor green space, right? But it's just not practical with Wi-Fi. But using CBRS private LTE, we're able to essentially mesh the whole campus and basically down convert for coverage for the students on the green space. So, God forbid you go to a classroom, they go sit under the tree, right? They're all happy because they can get their Wi-Fi to work. So, those are intangible quality of life that it's hard to put a value on, but are critical to supporting A, the community, right, and B, the students and the student life in that space, right? Questions, sir?
Yeah, sure. In Brazil, we are building an open test bed to be available to researchers and also entrepreneurs. And by the way, Open was defined by 3GPP and ETSI as the cornerstone for 5G, 6G implementation. So, but anyway, and we reserved some of the budget to foster what we are calling working groups to help to validate, test, and also improve the test bed. So we're going to give them money, and they will have workforce to use the test bed and then improve it. And we also doing the same open calls to startups that can use the test bed as well and validate their solutions. And this test bed also has 5G capabilities. I would like to know from you which initiatives you have to foster the use of your infrastructure, your solutions.
Yeah.
Which one?
So we have a few use cases. I mean, we have, so the incubator and accelerator that we mentioned, those are to foster specifically, the use of the 5G testbed. Each of the companies that are part of that. So they're all testing within that. Marie, do you mind just giving a couple examples?
Use cases?
Yeah, a couple
sure.
use cases.
Yeah, we have some all across the board. We have really early stage companies and then later stage companies. On the later stage side, I could give an example of there's a company called Grid Matrix, and they currently actually have a project in tandem with, I thought that was me, in tandem with the city of Denver and then also some university staff, and they've implemented some LiDAR sensors to track pedestrian and traffic walkways right across, like right within that 5G test bed. There's a really busy intersection, and that's one of the use cases. We have it's a snow plowing robot is one of the use cases as well. So I mean, truly across the spectrum, we're working with a company that she is developing a water pump with solar technology and then is going to use sensors, and that's how the 5G technology applies to that. There's applications. We had a couple companies that had wayfinding applications through their phone. So there's a couple examples. I mean,
yeah, and those are different than regular ones because they really need 5G for people with sensory issues. So like for the Denver International Airport, they're using it for people who are sight impaired.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's helping them guide them through the airport using these apps. Right, so, and they're able to map out the entire airport using this. So that's not within our test bed, but they're able to test a microcosm of that within our space, and then take it and once the Denver International Airport implements something there, they're able to then, scale that idea up.
Right.
Right.
I would say it's not necessarily, the companies we have don't fit in, as you can see, maybe a specific niche, but they all fit underneath the umbrella of, do they belong to the new majority? Can their technology be used? Can it benefit from 5G? And then does it belong to smart cities technology as well?
Yeah, everyone is looking after the killer app for 5G, but we won't find the killer app without testing different use cases. That's why it's always good to hear a little bit about other use cases as those that you are implementing. That's very good.
And a lot of these things work already without 5G, right? They work without 5G.
Yeah.
However, 5G gives them opportunities to, like I said, have bigger batteries or have longer battery life because they're able to offload some of that information or operate differently. Like the snow plowing robot, they need to operate with, it's a semi-autonomous. They actually need somebody to monitor it and make sure they're not running over somebody, with this thing. And, they can't get the kind of speeds they need during a storm from a regular LTE, cell phone system. So they need to have a different type of way to operate. So they're testing with us in order to see whether they're able to overcome some of those humps with 5G.
And on the business and human side of things, it also accelerates their ability to validate their concept.
Okay, thank you.
No problem, thanks. Anyone else got any other questions? All right. So, you mentioned something really good. Things are already working on 4G, right? And this just simply enhances them. So private LTE is not the catch-all that's going to replace everything, right? And we're not going to recreate the wheel. You're still going to have Wi-Fi, you're still going to have Wi-Fi 6, right? But these things complement each other, right? And that's one of the things that the big thing is that it can make your environment better and a more open type of working space for employees or for visitors or companies that participate, right? Those type of things I think are a fair statement, correct?
Yeah, and I think also when you have those overlapping technologies, right, you might need private CBRS for a certain application on top of all your other communication systems, right? It's not to replace everything else, but really to enable one specific use case that really needs that type of system.
Right, I think one of the keys on that is that, the end user, while like traditional 4G is owned by the carriers, in a 5G environment, and Doug, you can attest to this because you came from the carrier side of it, they own the data, right? They see the data, they can interpret the data in a completely different fashion, correct?
Yeah, that's true. So when you own your own Verizon wireless network, let's call it, you own the analytics. Today, when you're using a carrier network, they own the analytics, they own the data, and they're not sharing it with you. Not unless you buy it, they'll sell it to you, I'm sure, but in this particular case, the enablement of all that data comes into your purview, and then you can use that any way you want. So location-based services, you're not going to be able to get location-based services from the carrier unless you buy their application and use their app. So when you have your own network, you can apply your own app, you can collect all those analytics, so you can have geofencing of your campus, and you can know where pretty much everybody's at with the device that's on that network. So it's a great use case for public safety. If you have a active shooter situation in a facility and you don't know who's in the building, you can go and look at a single pane of glass, and you can say, oh, I know that there's 20 people in the building, and you might be able to message them specifically to have them move around to avoid the issue that's happening. So that's one of the advantages of having your own, right? So you own the data.
Now, from the developer side too, that's really important because you're able to see really how your device is performing, not just a go, no go, right? Traditionally of like, well, the light's on, but it's not doing anything. You're able to actually see some readouts. You're able to kind of be able to see behind the curtain of really what's happening with your product.
And that's key. Like Doug and I were working on an RFP for an airport just recently, and they're like, hey, we want all of this data. Well, it's carrier data. I can't give you carrier data. And they're like, we want to interpret it. And you mentioned the wayfinding for the blind folks. That was actually a use case that was in this RFP document. How do they enable those things? And that led to a separate conversation about enabling private wireless and a 5G network at that airport. It's actually Burbank is the one we're working on. And they're super focused on that and building their own standalone network. So, for us and for you, the overall, right, it's not a catch-all, all right, but we're dispelling some myths that it's not going to compete or chew up or eat up resources, right? It's going to complement and work to enhance the environment, right? So, I mean, for the school, the benefits, like this gentleman said, I mean, how do we quantify that for the community? Those are all essentially still being learned and thrashed out as we go through the new products and solutions. Correct?
Yeah, and for us too, you know, we saw it as a going up the stair, right? Like instead of being, you know, outfitting an entire campus with 5G, you know, because we are smart city focused, we basically took a block. So we have one block of the city where our building is at. We have the first floor of our building is 5G connected on the interior. And then we have two antennas on the roof
yeah.
that give us about half-mile line of sight, and we're able to deploy them, you know, in whatever spaces that we need within that half mile, which, you know, gives us a lot of options to do things, which it's affordable and it allows us to grow. So it's not a huge bite to you know, we don't have to eat the whole elephant in this sense, but we're able to develop that technology, build it, and then as we grow that use case, as we find new ways to use it, we can then implement it and grow, you know, its coverage.
Now that's an interesting thing you said, room for growth, right? So one of the things that we did when we designed this and put this together was we built a SAS and a core that can support up to 1,000 SIMs or 1,000 users on it, right? Which in the greater scheme of things, based on the, you know, student population and community population around it, is not a lot, but it's right out of the box. We can support up to 1,000 users or 1,000 devices on that system, right? So there's room for growth in respect to number of users, and it's very, very cost efficient when you boil it down to a cost per SIM, right? If you think about it in that light, right? If it's $40 cost per SIM with Verizon, what does it cost for my own private network? And it's a fraction of the cost, right? And you own your own data too, right? So it's a lot less, and you control it a lot more. So that gives you a whole benefit in that regard. So I think that's one of the key things, is room for growth. And then over and above that, and we can talk about it a little bit more, is the concept of mocking, right? And putting voice on it and doing, and Doug can talk at length about that if you guys have got any questions in that regard too, because that's the next growth path with it, is putting voice on it. You had a question, sir?
Yeah, I will go a little bit to more contemplative way of thinking of everything, because we are always thinking about pushing the efficiency of the network and think about it. But let's go to a more humanitarian talk right now. You know, technology is discriminatory by definition. It's like those who has access to it benefit from it, others don't. So when we come to this kind of talk, then we come to think about our future, more sustainable, more diverse, more inclusion, and etc. So what are the actions actually that the big techs that are developing, like 4G, 5G, and so on, that you guys are working on? What are the actions they are looking after to try to make it? Because, you know, we come from an underdeveloped country, so we have like poor cities that doesn't even have an antenna there, so they are not connected. And nowadays we cannot even use a bank if it's not net banking. And for those people that are not benefiting from all the connections we can give out and pushing the connections there. So what are the actions? What are your thoughts about it? So sorry for that, but it's something that we have to think about it. We are thinking about smart cities, but how we can be a smart city if we are not envisaging to encompass everybody, even from poor people from the neighborhood, from a poor neighborhood or so on. Guys.
Well, and I've heard the definition of a smart city being just the city that works best for people, right? It doesn't have to be filled with technology, right? So I think that's number one, first and foremost. But I think some of our approaches in that is we are trying to aim our program towards new majority founders. And those are people who generally never had a hand in developing an urban space that they live in, right? They aren't consulted when they are, when new roads are going in or a new building is being built or any of these things. So now they're having a hand in developing technologies and solutions for those communities, right? When it comes to accessibility, when it comes to wayfinding, when it comes to traffic management, all these things. So they are actually having an active hand in that space. We are also taking an international application. So we have companies from all over the world who were part of our last cohort. Many of the most innovative companies are not from the US when it comes to smart city technology. So we are bringing in some of those bright minds and giving them an opportunity to build their businesses here and bring their solutions here. So, you know, those are some of the small ways that we're doing that. But, you know, I think there's many ways that we can keep listening, keep talking. We started out this process by talking to over 30 different organizations around the world who try to provide opportunities for people from those different groups that we mentioned. So programmatically, we really tried to think of how we could be different as an incubator and accelerator, and how our school population as well is very different than many of the colleges around us. I think 50% of our students are first time within their family, you know, members of going to a university, right? First time having anyone in their family go to university, right? So they're not a privileged group. We don't have a big amount of rich students coming to our school. So we're really looking to bring them those opportunities. And this 5G network gives them the best technology available right now that they can test and use. So, you know, those are some of the small ways that we're trying to bridge that gap. I'd love to talk more afterwards if you have a moment.
Yes, sir.
First of all, that was a great question. I was going to ask something similar, but I have something new. One of the things that I thought of first was privacy. Who owns the data? Are you like, since it's a private LTE or 5G network, is it considered common carrier? Probably not, if I'm guessing. Privacy is you have companies from not in America, and privacy is a big deal here, right? So that would be my concern, is making sure that data, that people can, you know, I'm trying to formulate my thought here. Like, I love the innovation of it. I think there's a lot of really cool applications, but you know, you're talking about like, oh, I can see exactly who's in the building here. I'm like, well, I don't think I want that, you know, and maybe I'll just opt out if that's going to be the case, right? So how would you maybe allay those concerns for anybody that might have those?
Well, I think that the easiest way to explain the network is the network's the conduit, correct? Like we're the transport, and then
yeah. So I mean, private LTE networks is just the enablement of all these services that you guys want to deliver on a mass scale, right, over a big area, right? So, I guess in your question, you had said, what was the first part of your question? I missed that first part. You're kind of mumbled.
Who owns the data?
Who owns the data?
Yeah, like who owns the data? So I guess where you're going is, I think where you're going is basically we have to look at those companies that are developing the apps, what they do with the data too.
Correct.
I think maybe this is more on the front end than necessarily the network itself. So the network itself is protected, and that data is used by the companies themselves, and only those companies themselves. But what you're talking about is really understanding what the companies are collecting. And we actually have a process that we go through very similar to many of the research things that universities already do in terms of internal review boards when it comes to human subjects research and things like that. We do not collect facial recognition data, things like that. So some of the things that you're talking about, we already are very aware of, and we are not taking part in that particular type of data collection. So the process that we have is the companies have to give us they have to write out basically a testing plan. This is the type of data I'll be collecting, here's how I'm collecting it, and that goes to a review board, which is made up of our IT professionals within the university and our security professionals within the university. And they give recommendations on how that data will be collected and what safeguards need to be taken. And then that goes back to them. Those people then say, okay, here's how we'll do that. And they have a test protocol that they have to undergo in order to do that. All that is on top of the safeguards that happen within the network. So we have, as a university, we have our own testing protocol that we have to take on to make sure that the things that are being gathered are, above board, and we're not collecting data that people would take offense to.
So you're not the Mars candy bar machine? That was on the news?
We are not.
That's not doing facial recognition
We are
when you
not
buy
a
candy bar?
candy machine in the UK.
Yeah.
Taking facial recognition. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll know who you are when you come up, right?
One Snickers at a time. Yeah.
So your issue is privacy, is privacy of the data? Is that really what you're, in your first part of your question, is it privacy of the data that was concerned?
Yeah, more like who owns the data, what happened, because time after time after time we see these companies getting fined for saying they weren't going to sell any part of data and then they just do, right? So I just wanted to know where that data resides, and I think, because there's apps and things.
Yeah, I mean, that would be
of it.
obviously a matter of policy for whoever owns the data, right? How it would be used, and if it was to be used, for successful stories or for nefarious activities, right? But, I mean, we have that visibility now when you have a laptop connected to one of your IT networks. Keyloggers, you can see HTML hits, you can whitelist, blacklist. You can do all that now with a mobile phone under your own private LTE network. So you can extend those security policies into devices that you would normally have on a laptop. So when you have, let's say, devices owned by the university that, teachers, faculty, staff, whoever's using these devices, you can apply policy to those devices so that, you can extend that policy into the device itself. Like, say if you're in a research and development university and there's very sensitive material and people are in there with phones. So one of the things you can do with a private LTE network, you can have certain devices shut the camera off so that they can't even take let's say a photo of sensitive material in there. And if there was, they were able to, you could track that data to say, hey, this person took a picture inside this building. So you could use that, as a method of control, right, to make sure that this data doesn't get released.
Sure, I guess I'm more coming at it from the smart city standpoint, like private citizens, rather than like at a university. I can definitely see it at universities.
Yeah, all the sensors, cameras, all those things that are being hung on our property that are connected through that 5G network are also part of that testing protocol as well. So we would know if a camera is being hung that's collecting data and what kind of data is being pulled down and stuff like that. So we have a monitor on that.
Any other questions on that so far? All right, perfect. So one of the things, I'm going to go a little bit off general topic right now and just talk a little bit about the growth and where we can possibly go from a long-term point of view over and above adding users and technologies. And that's towards looking at the voice side of it. And Doug, I'll ask you to talk a little bit about that and the whole concept of MOCN, which is how you pronounce it, right? And running that over a CBRS private LTE network. I mean, that's the next big burgeoning push for this. And so the network that we have in place at CU Denver, I mean, that's basically ready to go in theory for that when we add on the gateways and whatnot. So can you talk a little bit about that and how we can expand on systems and add that on and, essentially evolve towards the next big push, which is a private network on a college campus, whether for a stadium or buildings or the campus, whatever it might be.
Yeah, so, to keep it brief, so MOCN, M-O-C-N, stands for Multi-Operator Core Network. So what this allows you to do, in the case of CU, they have their own core, and to have a MOCN core would then allow other carriers, let's say AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, to join your core and operate through your core to extend their networks into your facilities. So all these coverage problems you have, all these issues you have, and building gas networks and all these expensive endeavors that happen, what the carriers can do is just basically plug in to your core, and then they can operate through that shared network to access their devices across that campus or that environment. So MOCN's the next generation of, I guess we'll call it neutral host networks. So we're taking a shared resource today, and then we're going to take that shared resource and allow carriers to broadcast through that network, to get their devices to be on their network.
The only consideration on that is that it does require, because you and I talked about this the other day, a separate layer. So we're going to have one layer for CU and let's say CU's data apps, right? And then we would have a separate layer of APs for voice, correct?
Yeah, you would have two separate.
Two separate layers. But again, in that instance, you're able in a much more cost-efficient way to transport cellular data onto your college campus, right? And I don't know if you guys have ever dealt with this, but it's its own onerous process in respect to getting signal and managing that whole part of the puzzle, right? This, in theory, speeds it up enormously, correct, Doug?
It does.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally I don't want to say it's literally as simple as plugging in a gateway, right? But when you dumb it down, right, there's not as many parts and pieces to it. So for us, and for you, it's a great opportunity. Now, it's not the panacea. I don't have all the carriers today. I still have a little bit of legwork to do. We're about, 6 months out in theory?
It's still evolving. The two of the three carriers, I won't mention the third, but two of the three have adopted this principle and are in practice. Trials are going. These are happening today. One carrier is kind of off in their own camp figuring out how to do it a little bit different, but the consensus is that the third carrier will participate in these networks going forward. It has to, right? It's the only way to efficiently drive down the cost of delivery of a megabyte of data or a gigabyte of data through these types of shared networks.
Question, sir.
Hi, let me give you now a more regulatory related question. When we come to mobile virtual network operators, now we're talking about also the use of the whole infrastructure as one. But when I pick my mobile virtual network operator, they probably lease from AT&T, let's say. And then AT&T will be using the resources from Verizon, and then etc. There will be any regulatory issues because it's like the leasing of the subleased of the subleasing, and then probably some regulations will maybe get messed with that. Like what happens if a user receive a not very good quality of experience with their mobile virtual network operator, although they had these guarantees. But then when I come to AT&T, then AT&T, oh no, it's because he was connected to Verizon. I think that this is like indulgence, like giving the responsibility. So what's your experience about that?
I don't know if I fully understand the question, but let me, I guess, the context. So the carriers today work cooperatively together. They have to. So to avoid a lot of tariffs in the industry, to save money so that you guys have a cheaper phone bill, the carriers are all interconnected. They don't use any public networks for transfer of data. If you're an AT&T caller and you're calling a Verizon caller, that is all going across a private network between the carriers. There doesn't go into any public networks at all, unless there's some long-haul international, some other variants of that. But yeah, the carriers all work very close together, and there's always been good cooperation in the carrier world.
So there will be no issue if I mean like some very picky user will like try to measure his connectivity, his throughput, and try to sue the operator because he's not receiving the quality, and then discovers because he's in a neighborhood of Verizon and not in the AT&T, but he's served by AT&T, but they are using Verizon connectivity. So how regulations do with that? Or there's no thing, AT&T just assumes the whole responsibility and dies with that?
Pretty much, yes. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, great. So, I mean, in summary, I think, because we've got a couple of minutes left, I mean, overall, I think we're still working through the development and the rollout of all the different techs and platforms that we want to see at the school, right? The first thing we just got up and running this week was the LiDAR outside, right? That was affixed to the light poles. That looks great. So we started to test that real-time, real-world in the field right now out there. We're still working through bringing on new tech, new tenants, new everything, right, for the system. But I think overall it's been a success so far, and it's been a fantastic science experience, right? because we've got to grow and develop and see what you can actually do and make it a reality, not just something on a piece of paper, right? And I think that's one of the biggest parts of it. And being part of I2 here today, I mean, that's what this is, right? It's all about research and development and, you know, growing the community and bringing these things together. So I think we're seeing that, right? And we're having success with that, correct?
Yeah, and I think as Marie had mentioned, that kind of those layers of impact, you know, we're as the Smart Futures Lab, we're trying to support those companies first as part of that EDA grant, but as the researchers and, you know, our staff, or faculty rather, are able to use it as a research, you know, space to go and get more funding and develop their research around, as students are able to use this network to develop their own projects, to, you know, link back to their capstones, and, you know, we're able to incorporate it into courses and classes. I think all those things are going to start to build out use cases and hopefully develop a more robust program in general around RF and around these types of use cases. So we're really excited to see how this grows from here.
Well, great. Well, I thank you. Thanks everybody for sitting in. Anyone else got any questions? Because we'll call it with a couple of minutes to go. Yes, sir. Man in the front.
Yeah, you talk a little bit about the growing and expanding. Could you talk a little bit more about it? Do you have any plans to, I don't know, expand the coverage or even international collaboration maybe?
Well, you can, I mean, Doug, you can basically build a private network anywhere in the world. We just got to pick the frequency, correct? It's not necessarily 3.5 everywhere. It's
Yeah, so
900,
So
700.
the shared spectrum model globally is different in every country. Not every country has adopted shared spectrum yet. China, Asia,
Brazil?
India.
Yeah.
So I don't know about Brazil, but you know, it's growing, right? So every country's starting to get into this shared spectrum model, right? And every country similarly aligns with our spectrum plan through the FCC. So, you know, there's a lot of coordination globally on what parts of the spectrum that we allocate for certain things. For instance, there is a shared spectrum model in Germany, but it's 2 bands away from what we use here in the U.S., right? But it's not that your device, if you go to Germany, it would still be able to access that network, because most phones internationally will connect to almost all bands globally everywhere. It's, you know, your international roaming, right?
Yeah.
So.
But if you had a campus, let's say in Brazil, right, we could in theory build, or you could build a private network for that campus.
Oh, interesting.
Right, we just got to identify the frequency. So, like, I've got a couple of mining projects that I'm aware of and worked with down in Brazil, and they're running 900 megahertz on a private spectrum. Or they were using Ericsson for that. So it's definitely attainable.
Yeah.
The question is, you know, what do you want, to find the scope, and then from there you can build it out.
Interesting. Yeah. I have some ideas for cooperation.
In terms of expansion, you know, right now we have that kind of city block that we've kind of taken on, and I'm just really hoping that companies come in and kind of blow our minds about what they want to do with the spectrum, or, you know, with what we have, that forces us to expand. You know, or we have faculty that comes in and says, I've got a grant to do this, but we need to expand, get another antenna, and we need to expand down the street to this area. And those are all the ways that I think we'll be expanding immediately before 5G sees a bigger rollout, like, you know, to the public. So I think those are some of the immediate ways. As to international collaboration, we more than welcome it and be happy to talk more about how we could collaborate.
Yeah, cool.
And,
Interesting.
yeah, support whatever you're doing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, a few years ago we started a project that was giving SIM cards to students, and because they didn't have access to schools, so they could access remote schooling. And we used operators networks, but we are also already considering using private networks to provide the connectivity. So maybe it's a good fit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Well, I'd like to thank Dan, Marie, and Doug for letting us pick their brains, right? So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for participating. It would have been really boring to hear us.
Yeah, just listening to us, right?
Thank you.
Thanks so much.